It's an eventful weekend in Apple's history, of course, as we've been talking about over the last couple days. iPhone 3GS hits the streets, but Friday night, after the iPhone 3GS was released, we got word from the Wall Street Journal in a very oddly worded report that Steve Jobs actually had a liver transplant in Tennessee. Now, this stemming from health problems presumably related to his pancreatic cancer from a couple years ago. But there's weird questions to answer with this situation. And to maybe dive into the nitty-gritties of what exactly is going on at Apple, we bring in a couple of technology journalists. First, Jeremy Kaplan from PC Mag. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Also, we bring in Kevin Tofel from JK on the Road. Kevin, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
So this story is odd, obviously, for a lot of different reasons. First of all, it comes out at basically midnight on a Friday, which for financial journalists, they'll realize that this is meant to be put into silence. This should not get out, et cetera, et cetera. Jeremy, do you think that, first of all, do you think that we have a right to know Steve Jobs' health condition? Let's talk about that for a second.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, it certainly has been the topic on everyone's minds. Ever since we found out the man was sick, he's the driving force behind the company. A lot of people speculate that he's really the one that shapes and really creates all of their products. So, I think a lot of people are concerned about his health for that reason. What's going to happen to the things that Apple does if he's, for some reason, incapable to run the company anymore?
Yeah, so
that's the
basic
concern in a lot of minds.
So that's the basic. Now let's talk a little bit in depth about this. So with this liver situation, I mean, the Wall Street Journal report had listed no sources. Basically, it was like, we're telling you this is the truth because we trust our sources. Now, do you think with this announcement, do you think that this affects Apple in really any way, or did Apple really time this right to make this have a minimal impact?
Well, here's the curious thing about it. There's two competing forces with this story, right? As you're pointing out, you don't want the country to find out something, bury the news story late on Friday. No one's going to hear about it. The reporters aren't going to cover it. So that seems to speak to this being a legit news story. Yes, Apple released the information, bang, there it is, as late as possible. However, I would point out that there are only a handful of media outlets that get early access to Apple products, right? Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and USA Today. And they always have early advance notice, which Apple doesn't grant to anyone else. That, in my eyes, speaks to a special personal relationship between, if not Steve, at least somebody over at Apple that's disseminating information.
For sure.
So what does that all mean?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation for sure. So Kevin, with this situation, I mean, is there anything that speaks to you as being particularly noteworthy, or is this something that is so inside baseball that it's just, he had a liver transplant, we can kind of move forward?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear good news that he's getting healthy. That's first and foremost on my mind. I think there was some media spin, some very careful timing of this, and as Jeremy had said, certain sources may or may not have information before most everybody else. I certainly understand and appreciate that point of view. Yes, Steve's been kind of steering the ship through many years now, and I don't think anybody wanted to, upright the ship by putting this news out there in, highlights and on a billboard.
Yeah.
So, to me, as a consumer, I'm like, well, I hope he's okay, and and so on. As somebody who follows the space, I can see why Apple did it this way. I mean, I don't think any other company would have probably handled it any differently, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
I don't know. I'm skeptical about the reality of the whole thing, though. I mean, the fact that we know that Apple has this special connection with the Wall Street Journal, that says to me that they would put some happy face on the whole thing. I think his health problems could actually be substantially worse than they're letting us know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those situations where it's such an awkward thing to talk about, obviously, because Steve Jobs, he's a person, has a private life, but at the other hand, there's all these people who depend on him, whether it's employees, whether it's shareholders, whether it's, even just us as gadget consumers. We want to know if Apple's going to keep making products that we like. When Steve Jobs was gone, a lot of people didn't really like what Apple was doing. So, obviously there's a lot of different sides to this story. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about something that's a little bit of a lighter note. Now, after the announcement of all these problems with Steve Jobs' health, today Steve Jobs made his first public statement, although he wasn't really seen in public, but he said that the iPhone 3GS has shipped 1 million units. Now, it took 3 days, once again. The iPhone 3G had a similar time to 1 million units. Kevin, do you think that this milestone of 1 million units is something that we overemphasize, or do you think this is actually a big deal for Apple?
Oh, I think it is a big deal, and I say that as somebody who bought one of those devices, and also someone who 2 weeks ago, bought a Palm Pre, and they certainly haven't sold nearly as many Palm Pres as they have iPhones. I think what's actually more interesting to me, Randall, I fully expect the iPhone to, sell 5-6 million
For sure,
units
yeah.
like it would as usual. That's to be expected. What's really more interesting to me is in the same press release where they talked about the million sales of the handsets, 6 million customers have downloaded the new iPhone 3.0 software. I find that low, and maybe it's
Yeah.
just me.
I mean, so why do you think that would be the case, Kevin? Do you have any idea?
Well, it can't be marketing. I mean, people heard about this iPhone 3.0 software months ago, and it was also talked about with the handset and so on. So I'm really not sure.
Maybe it's just technology Luddites who dig the iPhone for its user interface aren't really
It could
upgrading.
be. It could be 1 million of us geeks or 6 million of us geeks grabbed it, and the rest of us are just kind of waiting, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know.
Jeremy, what's your take on the million iPhones sold? Is there any specifically noteworthy thing, or what do you think? Oh, Jeremy's frozen. And Jeremy's frozen. Oh, even better news, it's that whole computer. Bonus. Hey, it's back. Hey there.
Hey, we back?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's actually my computer's fault. It froze, so I don't really know why, but hey, whatever. Let me adjust the crop just a little. All right, so I'll just do a little
Just throw it
pickup
back.
action. So Jeremy, what's your take on these a million iPhone sales? Is there anything particularly noteworthy with it, or do you think it's just an inevitable, it's regular, run-of-the-mill?
Well, it's interesting that Kevin was comparing it to the Palm Pre. It seems to me that there's been more hype, more excitement about the Palm Pre, at least among people that I've been talking to, and that certainly hasn't had the sales. But Apple was definitely waiting for that 1 million. So, as with the announcement about Steve's health, I think we really have to take the stuff that comes from Apple PR with a real grain of salt. Did they actually sell 1 million, or maybe they're close to it, or maybe they've shipped 1 million to stores and they're counting on selling 1 million? This is also worldwide, right? It shipped out to 22
Yeah.
countries already, so maybe that had some factor on the whole thing. I don't know. Something about it feels wrong to me.
Yeah, so I mean, Jeremy, you sound really skittish about Apple PR. Do you think that, obviously through Steve Jobs' health issues and that whole thing that happened last year with, people reporting before Steve Jobs when he was going away, whatever, and Apple lying about the situation, what do you think Apple's gonna have to do to get your trust back and to get other people's trust back?
That's a good question. I mean, as a tech journalist, I'm in kind of a weird position. Apple has a very off and on relationship with the press. They go out of their way to make sure that no information comes out about their products beforehand, which makes it harder for us to do our jobs, of course. But as a consumer, we also like to find out about these things beforehand. There's reason for them to allow some of that information to get out. So, and because Apple has such a tight control over the information that we learn about them, it makes it kind of we're in a weird place with
Yeah.
Apple PR. That's the bottom line.
So we'll just
So,
have to kind of keep. Hopefully, if we just keep checking them out, whatever, we'll get to the bottom of the story instead of them dictating what the story is to us, like with so many other Apple situations.
that's exactly it. It's hard for us to dig into the story because they are so tight about things.
Yeah.
So do we ever really get the real story? Who knows?
I don't know. As long as we stay skeptical, I guess we're better than nothing, right? Guys, we're going to leave it
Everything's
there.
out
Jeremy Kaplan from PC Mag, he's executive editor over there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
Also,
you.
Kevin Tofel from JK on the Run. Kevin, any parting shots on Apple?
Well, they put things out in press releases. It must be true, right?
I guess. You never know, right? Apple says this,
Never know.
Apple says that. I don't know. We'll see. Thanks, guys, for joining us. I'm Randall Bennett. See you later.